I uncovered the terrifying genetic secret of the Fairmont family, a nightmarish curse they hid. I never should have opened that door. Deep in my gut, I felt it dread curled like a snake, ready to strike. Yet, curiosity pulled me closer. The Fairmont family had always been an enigma. Whispers and shadows followed them, an unsettling legacy that lay heavy over their mansion. They said strange things happened there. Children went missing. Laughter turned into screams. And no one really knew what became of the last heir. I met them on a chilly October evening, a fog creeping like fingers along the ground. I stood at the edge of their property, trees bending under the weight of night. The air was thick, charged with an electric tension that made my skin prickle. Every shadow seemed to shift, woeful murmurs echoing in the silence. "Don't go in," my friend had warned. But who listens to warnings when secrets stir in the dark? The mansion loomed before me, black and hollow, windows shattered like old memories. My heart raced. What if I found something real beyond that door? I stepped inside. The old wood creaked underfoot, a haunting chorus under the gloom. A pungent smell hit mid-amp earth, decayed. The walls held stories, layers of dust cloaking forgotten family portraits. Eyes stared out in morbid curiosity. I felt their gaze heavy, almost alive. Then it happened. A soft thud echoed from the upstairs, pulling my attention. My breath caught in my throat. Was it just the wind? Or had something simian shifted in the shadows above? I forced myself to breathe, to keep moving. Each step became harder, tied with the fear binding my chest. What did I expect to find? Every nerve screamed at me to flee, yet I pressed on. A chill swept through, fingers dancing along my spine as whispers darted around me. It felt ancient, a warning buried too deep. A flicker of movement caught my eye, something darted past, just a shadow, yet my heart pounded like thunder. Then came a crash. I froze. The noise ricocheted through the rooms, chaotic and piercing. I strained to listen, the dark closing in. I turned, heart hammering, brain screaming for escape. The shadows thickened, swallowed the remnants of light. A voice soft, a breath called from the depths, "Help me!" I clenched my fists, fear clawing at the edges of my sanity. I wanted to turn back, but another crash shattered my resolve. I was too far gone. I needed to know. I moved toward the staircase, each step taunting me with danger, hunger for the truth drumming in my ears. Another thud, closer now. I was not alone. As I reached the landing, something stirred in the corner, a figure, vague and terrifying. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. And then the door slammed behind me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stood frozen on the landing, heart racing as the door slammed behind me, the sound reverberating through the old mansion like thunder. Panic clawed at my throat. I was trapped. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating. I could hear the whispers growing louder, wrapping around me like a sinister embrace, urging me deeper into the darkness. The figure in the corner shifted, and even shrouded in shadows, I could feel its eyes boring into me, an insatiable hunger behind a veil of despair. I forced myself to move, edging closer, every instinct screaming to flee. "Help me!" the voice croaked again, a tortured whisper that sent chills cascading down my spine. Who are you?" I managed to stammer, each word feeling like a stone lodged in my throat. The figure trembled, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a face emerge from the darkness, gaunt and hollow, marred by unspeakable sorrow. That I lived, I was one of them, it rasped, and in that instant, all comprehension shattered around me. A chill swept through the air, the temperature plummeting as if the very essence of despair was seeping into the room. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I recognized the name, one of the Fairmont heirs. Missing for decades and believed to be dead. As I grasped the enormity of this revelation, a heavy thud echoed from below. A deep, guttural growl followed, crawling up my spine and replacing the frantic heartbeat in my ears with a primal fear. My heart pounded mercilessly, drowning out the whispers that danced through the air like dark birds. "Run!" The figure pleaded, a flicker of frantic panic igniting its eyes. "It comes for those who uncover the truth. It hungers." Clarity broke through my panic, and I turned to bolt down the hall, but the shadows shifted, coiling around my ankles like tendrils of smoke. I staggered backward, feeling the overwhelming weight of them, as if they were alive. Desperation clawed at my mind. "You don't run, you uncover the truth." But terror ensnared me, and I could only think of escape. Bolting into the room across the hall, I slammed the door shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I leaned against it, heart hammering in my chest, ears straining for the noises outside. The growl came again, much closer now. I could hear it scrabbling against the wooden floor, a grating sound that sent shivers through my limbs. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I took in my surroundings. Remnants of the past lay strewn about, a shattered mirror reflecting fractured images, a family portrait with the faces scratched out, as if something wanted to erase them from existence entirely. The weight of dread pressed down on me, heavier than before. Suddenly, the door shuddered, rattling in its frame. I jumped back, heart racing as the sound of scraping claws filled the space, verdict and threat mingling in the air. I glanced over at the window, and a movement caught my eye, a shadow flickering against the glass, impossibly elongated under the pale moonlight outside. Then I saw it, quick as lightning. Something darted back from the glass, as the distortion of its form, a mass of darkness with flickering eyes, reminded me of a lurking predator now locked onto its prey. I stepped back, my mind racing. Should I barricade the door or hurl myself through the window? And then, a voice broke through the chaos, layered with echoes of sorrow. "They need you to come home." The fairy tale of returning to safety twisted wickedly in my mind. I felt the walls pulse around me as the house began to respond, an ancient entity looking for a bond, a connection, something only blood could bring. I shivered at the thought of what that could mean. The whispers intensified, beckoning me, their tone shifting from pleading to demanding. I felt my feet moving before my brain could give the command, inching toward the door just as it burst open. The shadows surged in like a tide, and amidst their writhing mass, I could distantly see the gaunt visage of the heir, its mouth twisted into an agonized scream. "No. You have to leave. You have to." And then a pair of clawed hands locked around my throat, dragging me into the swirling darkness, and all I could hear was the cacophony of desperate screams, my own included, echoing in a horrifying symphony as the world around me went black. With a final breath, I felt the pull of the house. It wanted me. I was no longer the seeker of truth. I had become part of a nightmare that had no end, and in that moment of terror, the realization washed over me. Was about to uncover a secret far worse than I had ever imagined. A scream escaped my lips as the shadows enveloped me, but, just above the din, I heard a chilling chorus emerging from the walls, echoing my own cries of desperation, and they were all calling my name. The void was cold and suffocating, a heavy blanket of darkness that smothered the remnants of my consciousness. As the shadows tightened their grip, I felt a sharp pain cut through the abyss, a sudden gasp for breath as I was unceremoniously hurled onto a hard floor. The impact jarred me, vibrated through my bones, and the relentless snarl of breath returned, echoing like thunder through the silence of the space around me. I lay still, every instinct urging me to remain quiet, to reassess my surroundings while the oppressive darkness receded from my mind, allowing vague shapes to materialize in the dim light. Dust motes floated lazily through the air, but nothing felt serene. Rather, it felt as if the air was thick with dread, a stale atmosphere blanketing the rot of a time long past. Fighting to sit up, I strained to see where I had landed. My heart sank when I recognized the distorted remnants of a once elegant parlor. Tattered drapes hung like shrouds over worn furniture, and the scent of decay clung to every surface. The flickering of a single candle cast an unsteady shadow across the walls, dancing with a life of its own, mocking me in my vulnerability. It was then that I noticed the swirling remnants in the corners of the room, dark shapes slithering like smoke. I climbed to my feet, determination mingling with fear as I cautiously stepped toward a wall plastered with peeling paper that seemed to pulse. Voices surged within the walls, each one layered with panic, anguish, and the memory of desperate please me name threading through their cries, a haunting refrain that quickened my pulse. "Get out before it finds you," a voice rasped, buoyed by the lamenting echoes, ricocheting off the warped surfaces like an unholy choir. The sound of scuttling echoed from behind a nearby door, a cacophony of sharp nails scraping against the ancient wood, growing louder with each passing moment. I fumbled for the door's handle, but suddenly, the whispers transformed, shifting into cold laughter that lapped against my ears like cruel wavelets crashing against a shore of despair. "Join us," they intoned, a multitude of voices weaving a dark tapestry of invitation and threat. "Who are you?" I shouted, driven by a mix of fear and anger. "What do you want from me?" In response, a horrid silence enveloped the room, tightening like a vice. The shadows began to swell along the edges, coalescing into a figure that emerged from darkness, a silhouette garbed in remnants of tattered cloth, its face obscured. But the smoldering eyes, deep pits of despair, held me captive, like obsidian pools reflecting my own torment. "That I am she who once cradled the bloodline," it wove, its voice a soft caress laced with ice, "and within you beats the heart of my kin. The truth you seek is not merely of the Fairmonts, but of what we have become, a mosaic of darkness. They've called you home, and now you must bear witness to the depths of our curse." An overpowering sense of anguish flooded my veins, the knowledge hit me like lightning. There was something in me, something I couldn't cast aside. Were these fading memories I could not recall? Were these the remnants of a twisted lineage clawing their way into my consciousness? Before I could fathom my realization, the door behind me splintered open, flinging outward as something vast and dark loomed in the frame. I staggered backward, caught between the encroaching menace of the figure and the inescapable entity that beckoned me forward. The air shifted, an unnatural cold creeping through the room, coiling around me like a serpent. The laughter rang once more, a sonorous echo mingling with the desperate cries of unseen souls trapped in the confines of this haunted realm. I felt the house exhaling, its walls vibrating with a pulse that almost resembled a heartbeat. It urged me forward. Not merely as an observer of horrors past, but as a key to unlock its deepest, darkest secrets that threatened to consume not just me, but anyone tethered to this unpredictable fate. As I stared into the maw of the unknown, I couldn't help but pounce on a single thought: escape, escape, escape. But no sooner had the hope flickered to life than a grotesque figure lunged at me from the shadows, its breath a foul wind full of whispered secrets that threatened to pull me into their depths. And then I saw them, eyes emerging from the dark, dozens, perhaps hundreds, following my every move, their hunger palpable. They were waiting, watching, silent witnesses to my unraveling. Time slowed, and as the shadows ensnared me once again, I knew I was not merely facing my own fears. I was the harbinger of horrors yet to come, a pawn entwined in a lineage that had been cursed before I ever took my first breath. The laughter swelled, a haunting melody woven through the cacophony of whispers, and as the dark mass engulfed me, I found myself staring into those obsidian depths once more. The last thing I heard before losing myself to the void was a haunting proclamation, echoing through the chaotic din, a dreadful truth whispered directly into my ear: "You will join us or become one of them." I was back in the parlor, the room as it had been before, shadowy and oppressive. But now it felt different, the weight of an unseen presence pushing against me from all sides. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, the relentless laughter still reverberating in my ears like a wicked taunt. I stumbled forward, breath hitching, my instincts screaming at me to flee. But the door behind me had slammed shut, sealing my fate. As the darkness pressed in, I turned, desperate to find another way out, but the flickering candle on the mantel cast grotesque shapes along the walls, and they began to shift, transforming into faces contorted in agony yet locked in a timeless expression of pleading despair. Their mouths moved, but all that emerged were faint murmurs, reminders of savagery and suffering that suffocated the very air I breathed. Each imaginary tongue wove words of horror too terrible to utter, too twisted to hear. "Run. Do not succumb." One of them proclaimed, its face melting into the black of the wall as if it were being consumed once more. "It knows you, it seeks you, who? What knows me?" I cried, my voice thick with rising panic. Suddenly, the furniture around me creaked and groaned as if alive, the chairs shifting and sliding in my peripheral vision. I ducked, narrowly avoiding a groaning armchair that seemed to lunge toward me, clawed arms extending from the fabric, eager to entrap me in its decaying embrace. With a surge of adrenaline, I dodged out of the way, adrenaline flooding my veins like fire. I darted toward the adjacent room, my shaking hands searching for the handle of the next door. It was locked. My shaking breath rattled within my chest, each rattled exhale raising an orchestra of invisible eyes toward me, their anticipation palpable. With a blood-curdling shriek that echoed off the walls, something rushed through the air behind me, a thick tendril of darkness, writhing like a serpent, flicking toward my retreating figure. I threw myself against the door, my hands clinging to the knob, praying it would grant me escape. The shadows clawed at my back, pulling me into their depth, and I felt cold fingers wrap around my ankle. "Stay," I heard a whisper, his voice unmistakable, promising more horrors than I could bear. In a burst of sheer will, I yanked the door open, tumbling into the next room, only to find myself face to face with the skeletal remnants of memories long past. Paintings of Fairmont ancestors adorned the walls, their eyes seeming to watch me with unnerving sentience, as if they recognized their own bloodline running through my veins. Their faces gloaming in hues of green and gray, distorted and grotesque, twisted in silent laughter at my plight. In the center of the room stood an old, ornate mirror, its surface fragmented like freshly shattered glass. I approached it, feeling drawn to my own reflection, my pulse thrumming in my ears. When I looked closer, I could see not just myself staring back, but the shapes that hovered behind me, dark outlines shifting with malicious intent, their whispers echoing my nightmares. "Help us." A voice pierced through, a sudden clarity amid the chaos. It seemed to beckon from the mirror's depths, a soul trapped for eternity. "We are the Fairmonts, and we need you to know the truth of what we have become." I recoiled, the pieces of my fractured image blending fragments of my past lives, lives I didn't know existed. The truth curled around me like smoke, and I could feel it call, promise, and threaten all at once. "You must remember. Only through the lineage can the curse be undone. But it demands a price." My hand reached out slowly, hovering above the mirror's surface, caught in an unrelenting struggle between fear and the relentless pull of curiosity. As soon as my finger grazed the cold glass, an electric shock reverberated through me, coursing down to the marrow of my bones. The vision beyond the mirrored surface shifted violently, revealing fleeting horrors, twisted, hellish figures clawing their way out, each one who had mourned a lost connection, severed from their humanity. The dark tendril that had pursued me exploded through the door behind, billowing forth as it lashed out, a relentless pulse of malice that sought to consume everything in its path. I felt its cold breath against the nape of my neck as I succumbed to the reflection's grip, staring deep into the void of my own identity, wrestling with the knowledge that was now unearthing itself from within. They circled around the edges of my vision, slips of memory clawing through the recesses of my mind, revealing the faces of ancestors long lost, their entreaties a haunting echo begging to be heard. "The darkness carries our most profound secret, our curse, yours to wield, or yours to inherit." A terrible giggle erupted from behind me, and the shadows loomed larger as the ancestral souls reached out, begging for salvation or perhaps vengeance. Then the mirror began to crack, lines splintering outward like veins. "Choose." The voices exclaimed, urgency surging through their tone. "Your blood will bring us deliverance or damnation." I could feel their longing, their hunger, and as the reflective surface shattered completely, a deafening silence fell. And at the heart of the fractured shards, I caught a glimpse of something, a woman, gaunt and ghostly, her wails melding with mine as she reached through the broken glass, her hand stretching beyond the confines of space, as if begging me to join her, or perhaps push her back into oblivion. In that moment between breaths, I realized that to look back meant confronting the horror of my lineage, while moving forward meant risking the wrath of the darkness awaiting. And then, with one last rush of dark tendrils, I was pulled back into the shrieking parlor, the walls echoing their demand, "You must awaken the curse." My vision blurred, and the shadows closed in once more, a churning abyss reaching for my soul, but before it could consume me entirely, I felt a weight slip from my grasp. A flicker of realization struck me, illuminating a disturbing reality. That slender, ghostly hand, it had been passing a key. A key that could unlock not only the door in front of me but the ancestral ties that bound my fate to this catastrophic horror lurking in the dark. The last thing I heard, a chilling whisper within those curves of shadow as they engulfed me, was the promise of what lay at the end of my choice. Will you wield the hellish power, or will the shadows claim a new crown? I stumbled back into the parlor, the air thick and viscous with the rancid odor of decay, as if the very walls exuded the remnants of forgotten souls. The shadows shuddered at the threshold, pulsing like a living entity, lurching forward to claim me now that they sensed my uncertainty. I could barely breathe beneath the oppressive weight of their gaze, feeling the invisible thread of ancestral curse tighten around my throat. The shattered mirror had unearthed something maliciously sentient within me, a hunger I couldn't quite comprehend. My fingers trembled against the tempter's pull of the key, still hidden within my mind, its glow flickering like a dying ember in the recesses of my thoughts. It promised a revelation charged with both horror and power, the kind that could alter destinies or destroy them. Awaken, Elizabeth, the ghostly figures murmured, their lament echoing in unison, haunted by their eternal plight. You must embrace your birthright. That I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting against the urge to succumb to the darkness that writhed around me, and I flung my hands toward the door, desperately trying to find purchase. I could still hear the echo of the voices from the mirror, their accusations lacerating the air. The key is within you. Only through pain can you unlock the door. Frantic, I turned to the wall behind the parlor. The family portraits seemed to watch, their expressions twisted in both anguish and a kind of derision. As I approached, I could have sworn I saw them flinch as I reached for the nearest frame, feeling the cool wood beneath my fingers. The moment I touched it, the image flickered violently, a living tableau of ancestors who seemed to pulse with rage and sorrow. Their mouths moved silently, their eyes pleading for acknowledgement of their terror, for me to recognize the monster that loomed behind them. Do not leave. One of the figures screamed, the painted surface rippling as though flesh struggled beneath the varnish. But it was too late, I was ensnared. As I pulled the frame aside, a low growl reverberated through the walls, vibrating through my bones. The proximity of that ghastly sound stole my breath, yet I felt that key inside me ignite, an energy clamoring for release. As if drawn by an unseen force, my heart raced as I dug my fingers deeper into the wall, instinctively seeking to unearth the truth buried within. Wood splintered and cracked under my weight, as shadows leaped forth, swarming around me, trying to shield the horror from being unleashed. No. It must stay buried. Their whispers screamed, panic rising to an unbearable crescendo. My vision danced, blurring at the edges as I felt the shadows scramble, their tight grip faltering in the chaos. Suddenly, a violent rumble shuddered through the room. The ground heaved beneath me, while cracks spiderwebbed across the floor, revealing rifts that beckoned the darkness like malignant mouths ready to swallow the light. I staggered back, swallowed by the webs of intangible fear being woven around me, and then I saw it, a glimmering key, half buried within the dust and filth that had gathered in the crevice. It shimmered dully, pulsating like a beating heart, exuding an irresistible force. Gasping, I lunged for it, feeling the shadows tearing at my legs, icy fingers raking against my skin, urging me to give in. As my fingertips brushed the cold metal, a series of images burst into my mind, a cacophony of memories not my own. A young girl, no older than 12, locked in a faded attic with dark whispers curling around her like smoke. The face of a terrified mother, wrapped in rags, pleading for someone to understand. A man, once proud, now a wretched wraith, racked with guilt. I felt their anguish rippling through me as the shadows shrieked in anger, frail voices merging into a tempest of despair. I seized the key, an electric pain surging through my veins, anchoring me to my own reality as I wrenched it free from the earth. The shadows convulsed in fury, clawing at my feet, desperate, biting, trying to reclaim what was never theirs. Not again. The air vibrated with rage, with the knowledge that I had dared disturb the past. That I turned, see the darkness coalescing into a single figure, a smoldering silhouette that loomed larger than life. The hollow eyes bore into mine, a gaze filled with rage, hunger, and an indelible recognition. "You've touched the heart of it, child," it hissed, the words slithering like the shadows that twisted around it. "Only the blood of the Fairmonts can unlock the true curse, but there's a price to pay." Before I could comprehend its meaning, the walls tremored violently and the distorted voices of generations melded into a frenzied chorus, rising to a spine-chilling crescendo, screaming one name: Elizabeth. "Choose now, or lose everything." My heart raced as I clutched the key, hands trembling, my mind racing with the enormity of what was before me. I could feel the boundary between the worlds thinning, and as the shadows writhed in anticipation, I realized that my next choice would not just seal my fate, but that of the entire bloodlineath. Echoes of the Fairmonts pleading with me, screaming obscenities of the past, of the glory that could be regained, or darkness that would consume us all. That I and that final heartbeat, the shadows tightened their grip, whispering, taunting. And as I stood on the precipice, faced with irrevocable choices, the chilling thought struck me: if the key could unlock the curse, what awaited me beyond? An uncovering of truth, or the betrayal of everything I thought I knew. Before I could act or even speak, the darkness lunged forward, while waves of shadow seeped into the crevices of my thoughts, and I heard the ground beneath me cry out in agony, a warning I couldn't ignore. "The choice is yours, but it may shatter you entirely." And then, the air filled with a deafening crack as the ground split open, and I felt myself being dragged into the abyss of swirling shadows, clinging desperately to hope. Or was it the last remnants of my sanity? And in that moment, one final truth resonated through the howling darkness: there were some secrets even the dead would not leave buried. The world around me plunged into a swirling void, an enveloping darkness that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. I fell, weightless and panicking, teetering between realms until a violent force jerked me back, the familiar shock of cold wood against my back snapping me into reality. I lay sprawled in the parlor, breathless, heart pounding, surrounded by an unsettling silence that vibrated with lingering shadows. The key I had seized pulsed in my palm, a small, unassuming piece of metal infused with malevolence, its surface flickering as if in anticipation. The spectral figure loomed beyond it, becoming increasingly defined, a twisted replica of a woman I once knew. Her features congealed into a macabre semblance of my grandmother, features stretched by sorrow and malice, eyes dark like bottomless wells. "Why have you returned, Elizabeth?" she rasped, her voice a haunting melody dripping with despair. "You were not meant to awaken the truth." Desperation knotted in my stomach as I scrambled to my feet. The shadows shied away from me, but not entirely. They lingered, whispering doubts and fears, their garbled forms twisting and coiling around me like snakes, every flicker of movement from the corner of my eye a reminder of the horrors lurking just beyond reach. "I didn't mean to," I stammered, clutching the key tighter. I just wanted to understand." "Understanding is a cursed endeavor," the apparition of my grandmother whispered, each word dripping menace. "You think the key will free you, but you do not know the cost." The air thickened with dread as a sudden wave of nausea struck me. I felt bile rising as the walls around me began to bleed, shadows, curling and slithering across the floor like liquid darkness. I tore my gaze from her, forcing myself to look around the parlor, desperate for an escape from the suffocating presence that now bore down upon me as the flickering light cast grotesque silhouettes across the room. Just then, I noticed an old chest in the far corner. Its surface was covered in dust, adorned with tarnished brass fittings that seemed to hum in response to my heart's rhythm. With a breath hitched in my throat, I stumbled toward it, dragging the weight of the key behind me like an anchor. Insatiable curiosity propelled my footsteps, overriding the icy fingers of terror clutching at my spine. The shadows writhed closer, their whispers rising to a frenzy, a cacophony of despair and anger, urging me to flee, to abandon my quest for knowledge. Yet, the chest held a strange allure, and as I knelt before it, I felt a magnetic pull as if it were attached to some primordial hunger buried deep within me. With shaking hands, I undid the latch. The lid creaked open, releasing a cloud of rancid air like the breath of something long dead. Inside, rotting family heirlooms lay strewn together, yellowed papers curling at the edges with age. But there, at the bottom of the chest, nestled among the decay, was something horrifyingly familiar. A diary bound in cracked leather, the initials E.F. burned into its surface. I whipped the diary out, a sense of dread wrapping around my heart as I felt the weight of its violence. As I pried it open, the pages fluttered, revealing scrawled ravings, me ancestors' tortured jottings consumed by madness and despair. "The curse is blood," the first entry shrieked in fragmented ink. "Each child carries a piece of hell forged by betrayal." With every sentence, the air crackled with a palpable anguish that gripped my soul. My grandmother's image loomed closer, her form shifting with the words I read. Time seemed to dissolve, moments swirling within the folds of the diary as I became ensnared by its dark revelations. "It calls for sacrifice," a later entry warned. "The key is not one of metal but one of flesh." The shadows writhed frantically around me, voices clawing through the madness. "No. Don't listen." They screamed as the room seemed to tremble, vibrating with the weight of ancestral truths clawing their way to the surface. But it was too late, the chains of the past clamped tight around my spirit, and I felt the thrum of the key in my palm intensify, a pulsating drumroll heralding a fearsome fate. I had opened the door deeper than I ever intended, the labyrinthine family secrets widening as if the very air around me grew tainted with blood. An eerie stillness enveloped the room, freezing me in place, breaths shallow and ragged. A thudding resonance echoed from the walls, the sound enveloping meth heartbeat of the house itself, growing louder, vibrating through my ribcage, pulsating in unnerving harmony with the key. The shadows drew back momentarily, as a door behind me creaked, an exit I had not noticed before, a malignant invitation whispering my name. "Choose, Elizabeth," the apparition hissed, her form now more tangible, the lines of her lips curling into a mockery of a grin. "Embrace the curse, or lose your ancestral power forever." I trembled, torn between the hellish secrets contained within the diary and the door that beckoned like a glimmer of safety amidst encroaching darkness. Time frayed at the edges, breaths intertwining with chilling realizations, and an irreversible truth sank its claws into my mind. And as I stood poised at the threshold of one final decision, the door shuddered violently behind me, bursting open to reveal a blood-soaked landscape that rippled with dreadful echoes, a glimpse into the family curse, a nightmarish realm waiting to enfold me. In that second, the shadows rallied, surging forward, ravenous to claim me back. Before I could choose, the ground reverberated once more, angry roar splitting the room as an unimaginable horror materialized. At its core, a dark reflection of myself emerged, its eyes gleaming with my hidden fears and regrets, whispering in a voice that was sickeningly familiar. "Will you unlock the curse, or will you join the damned?" And as the shadows closed in around me, I stumbled back into the diary's depths, the pages flipping violently as they seemed to scream their warnings. Would I dare uncover the truth, or let the whispers keep me forever lost in the abyss of Fairmont secrets? The choice loomed before me, an open invitation to madness, and then a voice echoed, familiar yet twisted, "Elizabeth, it is time to choose." My heart thundered as the words echoed through the room, trembling with the weight of 1,000 ancestral regrets. The figure of my dark doppelganger hovered before me, an abomination weaving together fragments of my own reflection, eliciting a primal terror that rooted me in place. "Time to choose," it taunted, a sickly, distorted grin carved across its face. I steadied myself, taking a shaky step back towards the chest, my mind racing. I could feel the thrum of the key pulsating more urgently in my palm, vibrating against the layers of dread trapped within me. The diary whispered incessantly, urging me to confront either my lineage's sins or the horrifying truth lurking behind me. "Leave it be, Elizabeth!" cried my grandmother's ghost, her spectral face twisting in anguish. "You must not awaken that which has been buried." But the shadow moved forward, a sinuous blend of dark and light, embodying every fear I had ever harbored. "Embrace your legacy," it cooed, voice a seductive whisper skating along the edges of sanity. "Your power lies waiting, but it demands a tribute, your blood. The price for truth must be paid." The ground quaked beneath my feet as if the house itself disapproved of this lessening of boundaries. Tendrils of darkness coalesced and wrapped around my ankles, urging me toward the door that now dripped with an eerie glow. I could see horrors flickering vividly beyond that threshold, tortured souls and anguished cries flickered through the opening, beckoning me into the chaos. "No," I gasped, trying to drown out the cacophony, the enticement of commitment to some unspeakable ritual. I knew I needed a choice, yet every inhalation sliced through me like glass, each breath a reminder of what I stood to lose and what I might never understand. The curse is yours as much as it is theirs. My reflection shrieked, claws carving sinister shapes in the air. Embrace your destiny. In a flash of desperation, I clutched the diary, the rotting pages seeming to pulse beneath my fingertips. I felt the fear and anguish seep into my veins, a symphony of despair that laid claim to all I was. And in that pulse, I felt the heartbeat of the family curse, dark, sickening, and powerful, that I tore my gaze from my shadow's mocking visage and turned the pages frantically. I needed to understand. The fog of madness thickened around the words until I stumbled upon a specific, damning entry. To unlock the true power of Fairmont, a bloodline must willingly bleed for the right to commence. Understanding flooded me like a sledgehammer, the enormity of our family's fate crashing over me. I could feel the gaze of my ancestors igniting a raw yearning within, summoned by a darkness that pulsed with life encased in regret. Suddenly, the shadows surged again, howling their disapproval, as if I had invoked some ancient wrath. Choose. The shadow of myself screeched, eyes gleaming, mouth stretched impossibly wide. Give yourself to the curse, or be devoured by the truth. Before I could utter a word, a rush of wind erupted from the door behind me, visceral and cold, carrying the scent of rot and despair. It whispered the names of those lost, every syllable felt like a bullet aimed at my consciousness. The house shuddered violently, walls pulsed with painful memories, echoing soundless screams longing for release. Suddenly, an idea sparked a tainted hope. Perhaps if I gathered enough strength, I could drive the curse back into the void. I raised the key, the sinister metal shimmering in the dim light as I shouted, I will not be your sacrifice. But just as I felt the rush of power rise within me, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the depths of the house. A child's scream, high-pitched and echoing, melded with that of an adult's, blending age and innocence into a single agony. Time warped, my breath stopped as realization swept over me. No, it can't be. What have I awakened? The walls trembled, warping into grotesque shapes, every family secret clawing to the surface. Then, something shifted beyond the door, shapes emerged from the darkness, writhing forms that seemed to twist and groan. My breath quickened, my heart raced with a primal instinct to flee as their anguished faces emerged from the sorry gathering of Fairmonts, faces marred with sorrow, mouths moving in silent cries. The embodiment of betrayal marinating in an eternal purgatory awaited their reckoning. That I spun around, insanity clinging to the edges of my sanity, the shadow of my other self sneered, a snake coiled to strike, ready to claim my soul. Join us, Elizabeth, the chorus of despair whispered from beyond the door, urging me as it inched towards me. We are trapped as you will soon be. Yours is the blood that shall unlock the pain. With time unraveling rapidly, a final decision loomed over me, suffocating and heavy. The diary threatened to spill more grotesque truths, and the darkness surged forward, eager to claim its own. Just then, as I stood trembling on the cusp of destiny, harrowing regret sprang to life within me. A breath caught in my throat as I stared into the abyss. The key in my hand pulsed one last time, followed by a blinding flash of white light, and then darkness consumed all. I could feel hands reaching for me, clutching my arms, desperate to usher me into the deep unknown. And then I felt myself being pulled toward that terrible truth, not knowing what it would cost me, nor if I would emerge from the shadows on the other side. Time froze as the darkness swallowed me whole, encapsulating me in a stranglehold of dread. Then, I heard it, an unmistakable voice cutting through the dark, blending with the shadows, murmuring a promise that would shatter my sanity. Elizabeth, you cannot go back now. The darkness that enveloped me was thick and suffocating, a malevolent presence that slid over my skin like an oily shroud. I struggled against the grip of the unseen hands, their clammy touch igniting a fire of panic within me. The whispers reached an unbearable crescendo, a cacophony of despair as voices intertwined, each one piercing through my soul, dredging up every painful memory I'd ever tried to forget. Your blood binds us, Elizabeth, they hissed, their spectral breath cold against my ear. It must flow to seal your fate and ours. There's no turning back now. Straining against the oppressive darkness, I fought to reclaim my individuality, to tear myself away from the shadows promising liberation and power. But the more I resisted, the stronger their grip became, as if the house itself swelled with collective rage. Each flicker of movement around me morphed into twisted faces of those lost to the curse, faces that begged for salvation yet were marred by torment. Then, a flash of light surged beneath the darkness, illuminating twisted relics that flickered weakly like fading stars. Memories flooded back, bits of laughter, warmth, but layer upon layer was tainted by centuries of betrayal and death. I could almost see my family again, their faces flickering like the dying embers of a once raging fire, their eyes brimming with sorrow and questions left unanswered. "Help us." Their combined voices cried, deep sorrow woven into every plea. "This is your heritage, your duty to the Fairmont legacy, your answer." Feeling the key pulse in my palm, I squeezed it tight against my chest, its jagged edges biting into my skin, anchoring my thoughts to the present. I could feel the weight of my lineage settling heavily on my shoulders, an ancient obligation twisted with an unbearable burden. "Awaken it." The shadow mockingly urged. "Seal your place among your own, Elizabeth. Become the vessel of our glory." That I stood on the precipice of an abyss, conscious dread clawing its way into my mind as I contemplated the swirling darkness threatening to pull me in. My heart screamed against the mad delight that swelled within me, not from the bloodlust of power but a craving for freedom. Yet, could I truly free myself at such a cost? The specters turned ravenous, their chants merging into a haunting dissolution that wound around me like a serpent preparing to strike. They were wrong, Elizabeth. Embrace the legacy. Awaken that which lies dormant. Release it, and just then, a tendril of shadow snaked forward, weaving between the space before my eyes. It stretched toward me, coiling around the key. I watched in horror as a pulsating rift opened just beyond, a maw of swirling chaos that beckoned to me with insatiable hunger, a promise of answers hidden in its depths, yet brimming with unspeakable horror. "What strange thing waits for you?" echoed from the depths, chilling my bones. "A secret that binds your blood to them. Awaken it. Set them free." I felt myself waver, teetering between the unearthly temptations of power and the weight of my heart pleading for release. The wall began to shake, the ground tremored beneath me, threatening to swallow the house whole. Desperation gripped me as shadows danced hungrily at the threshold of that dark realm, pushing me to give in. I shouted over the clamor, holding the key high. The flickering light grew more intense as it bent the shadows, carving out a sliver of clarity amidst the chaos. "I will not sacrifice my essence for your damnation." In response, the spectral hands pulled tighter, wrapping around my wrists, pinning me in place with an unyielding force. "Fool! Your fate is sealed by blood. You cannot escape it." As their shrieks crescendoed, I drew a deep breath, feeling the warmth of my heart pulse with defiance. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as everything around me spun wildly, the darkness pressing in. I screamed as I turned the key, edging it toward the ravenous shadow waiting before me, a blistering light igniting as I thrust it toward the festering depth. The instant the key touched the void, it ignited with a blinding brilliance. The roar of souls unleashed like a storm thundered around me. The shadows hesitated, their eyes widening with disbelief, a moment of sheer chaos fracturing their relentless pursuit. And then, within that blinding light, a figure emerged, brilliant and terrifying. It stepped forward through the waves of shimmering energy, the face of a child marred by deep-set grief, eyes swirling with secrets bound by blood, and behind her, shadows cowered and shrank. "Release me, Elizabeth," her tiny voice rang out, echoing through the house with the solemnity of a funeral bell. "I am the answer to your curse." Suddenly, the walls around me began to warp and stretch, crumbling beneath the weight of generations' remorse. The crescendo of cries swelled as forces I couldn't comprehend contorted reality itself, and I was left gasping for breath in the eye of despair. But as I turned to face her, the dark hand of the house reached out once more, seizing my heart and tightening around my soul. The child's voice surged above the noise, each word a litany of urgency. "Unlock the truth, Elizabeth. Choose before it chooses for you." In that flash, my vision fragmented, the house screaming, shadows clawing for dominance, and the connection to the light flickering like a dying star. A choice loomed, one dark, one light, both horrifying in their potential. In that moment of unending terror, as a shadow fell over my heart, I felt the ground tremble and knew that reality was about to shatter. The last shred of resolve bled out of me as the house screamed in defiance. Darkness surged, and I could not tell if I had awakened a truth or unleashed a greater horror, but one thing was painfully clear: time was running out. The blinding energy swallowed the last vestiges of the dark realm, but I barely noticed as the world spun in bewildering chaos. The house groaned under the weight of unseen forces, as if it sought to shed its burden, yet it clung to its secrets with abject fury. The child stood resolute in that ephemeral light, an anomaly gripped by tragedy, as I fought against the gripping pull of shadows that sought the truth at any cost. Unlock the truth. She cried, her eyes illuminating the chilling depth of the horror I might unleash. Only you can decide. But know this: every choice has its consequence. Suddenly, the walls trembled violently, splintered timber cracking, and dust erupted from the ceiling like a storm unleashed. The once familiar structure that had sheltered generations of Fairmonts now felt like a twisting maze of dread, clawing at my sanity. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, writhing like snakes ready to strike. The whispers intensified, darting among the rubble, intertwining with the cries of the child. She lies. It is not your legacy to free. Do not trust her, Elizabeth, do not listen. The child implored, her voice filled with an ache. The darkness seeks to twist your heart and bind you as it has us. You are the last of your bloodline, the last hope. As if in response, the shadows surged forward, pushed by an unseen tide. Tendrils snapped and lashed toward me, wrapping around my legs as they pulled me down, threatening to drag me into the obscurity below. I fought with everything I had, replacing fear with adrenaline, but it was insatiable, relentless in its pursuit. Awaken her. They shrieked, their collective voice wrapping around me like an unyielding vice. Be the voice that seals our fate. In that relentless tug-of-war between the light of the child and the darkness of the house, a new awareness gripped my heart. My family had not just been victims of this curse, they had once wielded it as a weapon, a great power which had turned against them in the end. It became painfully clear that my blood was a torrent of dualisha bridge between the ethereal light and the sinister shadows that had birthed this malevolence. Elizabeth, please. The child implored again, her small voice trembling. You must choose before the house takes the choice away. In that moment, a vision broke free from my Minda memory long forgotten. I saw my ancestors, not in defeat but in an intoxicating rush of power, wielding shadows as their kin, bending reality to their will. They had been revered and reviled, they dashed through the fabric of life like mad weavers, crafting destinies, along with the lives that stemmed from them. Each branch of that legacy now pointed back to me, a line of fate stretching thin and ready to break, but with each heartbeat, I saw the consequences of power, not glory, but suffering, twisted into a perverse dance of betrayal among those who had come before. This house was a mausoleum, a prison built upon the bones of those betrayed. How many had promised salvation only to become ensnared in the very darkness they sought to control? Do you want your ancestors' memories to fade away into the abyss, Elizabeth? They hissed, the shadows contorting with every breath. Join us. Become one with your legacy, feed upon the power that flows through your veins. Awaken it fully, allow the curse to flourish. No. I shouted, as if my voice could pierce through the cacophony of discord. I will not inherit your fate, but in defiance, a sudden gust rushed around me, extinguishing the fragile light in a single breath. The house contorted, shadows gathering in a malevolent swirl. My deepest fears spun out of control, threatening to make me lose my very sense of self. Elizabeth. The child's voice cut through the vortex, a haunting echo of desperation. Find the heart, find the truth before they take all of you. Her words set off a flicker of realization deep within the turmoil. The heart of the house, the heart of the darkness that had entangled my family for centuries, might hide the answers. But should I find that heart, what form would it take? Would it be salvation or destruction? In that moment of chaos, the walls reeked of betrayal, and the ground beneath me began to quake. I felt the reverberation of malevolence seeping into my essence, boiling with rage. Choose now. The house screamed as it began to fracture. Before I could even consider the consequences, I lunged forward, the little girl disappearing into a blinding whirl of light as shadows closed in around me, threatening to drown me in blackness. Then, out of the stony silence that settled in the wake, a terrifying realization gripped my heart like a vice: the child's presence was fading. Would finding the heart mean sacrificing her at last? I believed I was about to uncover the horrific truth of the Fairmont legacy, yet it now felt like I was racing toward the brink of obliteration. In one final instant, with arms outstretched, I caught a glimpse of my ancestors, their faces twisted in a grotesque array of triumph and despair, hovering just beyond my grasp. The house shook as if the very foundation could sense my intent. And the darkness screamed, its voice an amalgamation of rage. You dare seek the heart? The ground beneath me erupted as an enormous shadow formed, a monstrous visage that roared as it lunged for my soul, filling the air with acrid despair, dragging me into the chasm of despair I had sought to escape. With shattered thoughts and an undulating scream, I knew I was about to either inherit the legacy of doom or become a sacrifice to the very evil that sought my heart, and time was gone. As I plunged into the depths of that swirling abyss, dread clawed at every inch of my being, merging terror with desperation. The shadows writhed around me like serpents desperate to reclaim their prey, and yet, amidst that maelstrom, a single thought carved through the chaos: the heart, the core of the Fairmont legacy. Light shimmered like a distant star, flickering on the edges of reality as I tumbled headlong into the void. It pulsed in rhythm with the thundering beat of my heart, it was drawing me in, beckoning, while the surrounding darkness clamored for my submission. I surged forward, my instincts igniting my speed, fueled by an emerging resolve to confront whatever demon awaited me. Suddenly, I landed hard on a cold surface, the world stabilizing around me. Dazed, I caught my breath and scrambled to my feet, surveying the scene laid before me. I stood in a circular chamber, hollow and vast, illuminated by a ghostly glow emanating from an altar at its center, a crystal pulsating with energy that throbbed like a living heart. Shadows moved uneasily along the walls, whispering in tones that sent shivers cascading down my spine. They twisted and coiled, hungrily eyeing the light at the altar that cradled the very essence of the Fairmont curse. That I approached cautiously, each step reverberating in the hollow space, echoing the tortured cries of those ensnared by this malevolence. Their faces pale and gaunt swirled in the backdrop, remnants of my kin lost in the shadowy chaos, endlessly pleading for release. Dread pooled in my stomach, but determination stitched itself to the fabric of my resolve. Somehow, I would confront this darkness. As I reached the altar, I felt the oppressive nature of the entity surging below, a palpable force echoing the urgency of a heartbeat. It was as if the very foundation of the ancestral knowledge craved liberation, wisdom forged in blood and betrayal. Grasping the key that had led me here, a grotesque weight in my palm, approached the crystal, its light dazzling yet ominous. Elizabeth, a voice rippled through the shadows. It was my grandmother, her whisper a spectral caress that both comforted and terrified me. Unlock it. Free us. I hesitated, heart racing, weighing the darkness threatening to envelop me against the tether of my bloodline. The shadows swirled furiously, churning like a tempest, sensing my doubt. Join us. They hissed, their voices a chilling symphony of longing. Only darkness can free you. But the glimmering crystal ignited something deep within me. A memory flickered, illuminating what had been hidden. My ancestors, powerful and proud, wielding shadows like tools, entwined with both light and darkness. They had not simply been cursed, they had chosen to embrace the very dark they now feared. Desperation morphed into clarity, and with a sudden rush, I plunged the key into the crystal's center. It fit perfectly, and I turned it, breaching the protective barrier that had shrouded this truth for far too long. Light erupted, blue and blinding, as if 1,000 screams surged upward, mingling with the hungry chaos swirling around me. The shadows recoiled, screeching, their forms twisting in denial. But I wouldn't let them claim me. I stood my ground and called forth the ancestral essence bound in the light, feeling it pulse through my veins. No. I bellowed, a declaration that reverberated through the chamber. You will not drag me down. You are not my legacy. In that moment, the energy coalesced around me. Vivid colors sparked, representing the lives that had come before, their anger, pain, and strife melding together into something profound. The chamber shivered, echoing the heartbeat of the mansion itself, the very fabric of my bloodline entangled within. the shadows howled, distorted faces appearing through the chaos, rage fading into despair as the essence fled from the breaking point. They clawed at the edges of the light, demanding to keep their secrets buried. "You will pay for this!" they shrieked, but I welcomed the pain, felt it as part of the awakening. As the crystal absorbed the shadows, the tide shifted, I became a conduit, a bridge between despair and hope. I could feel the 1,000 souls trapped amongst the shadows combining forces, urging me to take hold and make this sacrifice for the sake of freedom. I drew strength from their collective will, ripping the walls of malevolence apart, and in that moment, clarity surged through me. The true cost of the curse was not my sacrifice, but my acceptance of the duality within the shadows, forged not merely from despair, but from choices made long ago that shaped a lineage I now carried. I released the key's grip and stepped forward, embracing the light without losing myself, no longer just a victim of their mistakes. With a deafening roar, the darkness erupted as the crystal shattered under the weight of what had long been contained. The shadows shrieked in unison, faces melting into nothing as the chamber imploded with blinding brilliance. And as I felt myself pulled away, wrenched from the cycle that had bound my family for ages, a truth echoed in my mind like an incantation. I had not freed just myself, but the very legacy of the Fairmonts. The price would always be blood, but not solely of sacrifice. It demanded truth and acceptance. That I emerged from the chaotic void, back into the parlor of the mansion, gasping for breath. I was different now. The air felt lighter, almost like the house itself had shed a burden, the shadows receding to distant corners, breathing with a quiet sigh of relief. Yet as I stood amidst the remnants of the past, I felt a chill scuttle down my spine, a warning something was still lurking, a flicker of darkness still lingering like an unwanted guest. The walls whispered in soft reluctance, beckoning me closer. As I turned, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a reflection rippling in the smooth surface of the shattered mirror I had overlooked. And there, with a deep sense of dread, I caught a glimpse of my own face twisting into an unsettling grin, the shadows reveling in my victory, reminding me that I would always be a part of this bloodline, caught in the delicate balance between light and the dark. My heart raced as I took a step back, but the mirror pulsed with energy, a reflection not just of my visage but an invitation to look deeper. The shadows lingered behind me, restless and unsatisfied, whispering promises of power, of an inheritance that could still haunt me. Perhaps I had escaped. Or had I merely opened the door to an eternity of deception wrapped in choices yet to be made? I took a deep breath, the threads of my lineage woven tightly around me. The truth remained: the light and darkness would always dance within, an inevitable duality I would bear. And as I turned away from the reflecting glass, a chilling thought settled within me. In the heart of every shadow lies a flicker of the past waiting to claim its own. And I had just invited it back in.